In my last video, a commenter by the name of Marcus asked me a question. And Marcus, I appreciate your question so much. The question revolves around the idea of, if God is all loving, how could there be a hell? And I will read his question in full here shortly. So Marcus, thank you so much for your question. I sometimes get to a point in my day and my week where I feel like I've run out of things to talk about. So sincerely, I really appreciate you asking this question. And my hope is that you at least watch this video in its entirety and find some value in it. I'm not here to try to convince you that I'm right. I'm just going to give you my perspective, and hopefully you find value in it. So the important thing to remember when I respond to this question is that this really gets into Christian philosophy and apologetics. So nothing I say in this video is going to convince you or anyone else that God exists. In addition, I don't have perfect theology, and nobody does, right? God is trying to relay information to us as clearly as we can understand it, but because of that, there's going to be things that we just can't quite comprehend. It's kind of like us trying to explain rocket science to a dog, right? It's just, there are things that just aren't going to be understandable. But with that said, I'm going to give you my perspective on this question. Other Christians may disagree with me. You may disagree with me. That's perfectly fine. As a society, I think we've lost the ability to just discuss things that we disagree on. So my goal is not to convince you that I'm right. My goal is to just give you my opinion because you asked a question. So my hope is that I can answer it intelligibly and you find value out of my response. So with all that being said, let me read the comment. The comment says, "The fact that God knows everything and loves everyone the same, but there still is a hell, is probably the most unsettling contradiction. How can a person know everything and still be shocked when someone goes to hell? They knew exactly what that person did and did not need to go to heaven. So why doesn't he just give us what we need to go to heaven? And if you bring up free will, I'll say it's worse when life is so short, but hell is infinite." So there's a lot to this comment, and there's a lot to the question. And so I'm going to try to break it down into segments that are going to build off of each other. So the first thing I want to address is what sounds to me like a moral objection to the idea of God sending us to hell. If God's all loving, it'd be wrong of him to send anyone to hell for all eternity. So to start, we're going to simplify that question a little bit further and say, does moral objectives exist in the world, in nature? Is morality true, or is it opinion? And I think that's an important premise to start on, because oftentimes people who claim that God doesn't exist will still claim moral truths, and the question is, where do those truths come from? So there's really only two options for this question, or for the answer to this question in regards to morality. Either we were created by an intelligent being who set a standard for how we should live, or we came about via random chance. If we were created and there is a set standard, that means there's objective moral truths. If we weren't created and everything came through random chance, then there is no moral standard, and morality is just a matter of opinion. It's my opinion versus your opinion, or a society's opinion versus another society's opinion. As an example, at one point there were societies that thought that human sacrifice was completely okay, while other societies disagreed. The question is human sacrifice morally wrong? Well, without a God, the answer is no, it's not morally wrong. It's not right or wrong. Some societies think it's fine and some don't, but it's not wrong. However, if a being created us, they set a standard, and that standard would tell you if human sacrifice is right or wrong. So in order to claim a moral objection to an all-loving God sending people to hell, you'd have to say that there's a standard of morality, and you're saying that that thing would be unjust. You can't claim anything is truthfully unjust if God doesn't exist. All you can say is that as far as you're concerned, you don't like it, right? It doesn't feel right to you. It doesn't feel fair to you. But you can't claim that it's actually unfair because nothing's fair or unfair if God doesn't exist. Now that goes into the next part of this. So if God exists and moral standards exist, then an all-loving God who sends people to hell sounds like something that would be morally wrong per God's standard. And I can see that, and I can see how you could view that as a contradiction, and I think that's what you're getting at. But here's the thing, because God does love his creation, that means he loves the person who is harmed. So in a given situation, if one person harms another, because he loves those people, because he loves creation, he wants to see justice done to the person who harmed the other individual. If I have two children and I love them both, which I do have two children and I love them both. I don't know why I said if, that was weird. I have two children, I love them both. If one of my children punches the other child, I will make sure that the child who punched the other child is punished because of my love for my child that was injured. It would be completely unloving for an all-just, all-loving God to not send people to hell who have done wrong, to not punish people for their bad choices. Because the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. If my one child punched my other child and I went, no big deal, that is unloving. And so because God is love, he does administer justice. And because he is all just, he administers justice equally across the board. Now, what you didn't directly say, but it sounds like you're struggling with, is if we have free will and God is omniscient, he knows what we're going to do, which means it's morally wrong for him to punish us for doing that thing. And I think the breakdown here comes into, is foreknowledge directly related to having someone make that decision? And the answer should be no. For example, if I present either of my two children a cookie or a piece of broccoli, I know 100% of the time what they're going to pick. But does that mean that I made that choice for them? Well, no, I just know based on what I know about them how they're going to respond to those options. Now, you could then go and say, well, why doesn't God just offer us broccoli? Why not just remove the choice? Well, see, by removing the choice, we still have the option to just not choose at all. Using that same analogy, if the only option I give my two children is broccoli, they will starve. They just won't eat. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, they just will refuse to eat if I present them something that they don't like. And God is the same way. God could give us the only option to worship and honor him, and we could just say, you know, I'm just gonna starve. I don't want anything to do with you, God. I'm not doing that. And would God be shocked? Not at all. I'm not shocked when my children choose a cookie over broccoli. I'm not shocked when they choose to not eat when all I give them is broccoli. Because I know them so well, I know what choices they're gonna make. Here's the thing, we're just like that. We always want to choose the cookie, which is the things that aren't good for us. So even if God eliminates that, we're still not going to choose him if we don't want to choose him. Just kind of like feeding that kid. If the only options I give them are broccoli, they're just going to starve themselves because they don't want it. Now, the last thing that you have to remember is that this can be viewed like a relationship you're pursuing. I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, Marcus, but I have, where I've pursued a woman who just wasn't interested in me. I was pursuing them and pursuing them and pursuing them, and they finally said, you know what, I'm not interested in you. Now, the most loving thing I can do in that situation is to let them go and say, all right, fine. It's okay, right? The worst thing and the most unloving thing I can do is to say, hey, I love you so much, I'm going to force you to love me. Not only is that unloving and unjust, but it also doesn't have love reciprocated. That's not a relationship filled with love. The person that I'm forcing to love me doesn't actually love me at all. So yeah, could God remove all of our choices and force us to worship him? Sure, but that's not love at all, right? Because we don't want to make that choice. We're being forced to make that choice. So here's the problem with that analogy. Because that analogy does work, at some point, because God loves you so much, if you continue to refuse him, he's going to say, okay, I'm going to leave you alone and let you choose what you want to choose. For example, if heaven is an eternal church service, I don't know if it is or isn't, but let's just say it is an eternal church service, would you want to be there? And if you say, no, I don't want to be there, God's going to let you make that choice. Even if it's better for you to want to be there, he's going to allow you to make the opposite choice. So the last thing that it sounds like you're asking is, why doesn't God just reach out to everyone? And that's a much harder question to answer. But I will tell you that I can't speak for everyone. I can speak for myself, and I can speak for you. Because it is possible that right now, in this very moment, Marcus, God is using me to reach you. He's using me to give you the choice and to say, hey, listen, God does exist. His son, Jesus Christ, came and lived on this earth, a perfect, sinless life, and he died not for random people, but for you personally. Because none of us are good enough. I'm not good enough. You're not good enough. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. The wages of sin is death. We all deserve nothing but God's wrath. And that's hard to wrap our heads around, but that is the standard, moral perfection. That's what God established. If we fall short of that, we deserve to be punished. We deserve damnation. But God did provide a way out. He did make it possible for us by putting our trust in Jesus Christ, by putting our trust in the promise that if we trust in Jesus Christ, we will be redeemed with the Father, will be forgiven for our sins, and we will have eternity. We will end up in heaven. That is something that's being told to you right now, in this very moment. Now, this is just me speaking, but it could be God using me to reach you personally. And you, in this moment, Marcus, are given a choice. You can choose God, or you can choose not to choose God. But at the end of the day, you have the ability to make that choice. So when you say, why doesn't God reach out to everybody? I don't know. But I can tell you right now, you are receiving the gospel message. You're receiving the good news, and you have a decision to make. And so at this moment, God is still pursuing you. He's pursuing you right now through this video. But there may come a time when he finally says, you know what? You don't want me? Fine, I'm going to let you have what you want. And I pray and I hope that that doesn't happen. Marcus, I really hope that this video was valuable to you. That's my 2 cents, worth about a half a penny on this subject. I know it's not perfect. Again, I'm sure that there are other Christians that have different perspectives who might even disagree with some of the things that I said. But you asked for my answer, so there it is. Again, I hope you found value in it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Again, I'm not really big into commenting. I'm not really big into writing. That's why I'm on YouTube. So if you leave a comment, I may not respond. Sorry for that. But in addition, think about that. I very rarely respond to comments, but something about your comment spoke to me, and I reached out to you. And that led to this video. If that's not God working through your life, then I don't know what is. Alright, I hope you have a great day. Christian friends, if you're also watching this video, please continue to be the salt of the earth. Be the light to the world. Go encourage somebody else today because the world desperately, desperately needs it. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.